Hi everyone! After all is said and done, I think this is going to be one of my favorite designs we've created yet to date. We're going to be dealing with a flocked wreath today that we picked up from Walmart. As you can see, there's different types of pine and spruce within this one wreath, so I think this is a great value for $9.80. It's labeled as a 24-inch flocked wreath. I'm not sure if they sell these on their website, but they do carry them in store. And every Walmart that I've been to, which is about 5 or 6 this time of the year, they all carried them. What we're also going to need is some ribbon from Trendy Tree. This is one of my favorite ribbons, and we weren't able to use it last year, but we're going to put it to use this year. The item number is RW7620F3, and the reason I love it so much is that it has that nice flocking. It's covered in iridescent and clear glitter, so it kind of creates that icy look. And we're also going to be dealing with some chicken wire. I love using this product for Christmas time, and this one is the red one covered in the flocking material. The item number for this from Hobby Lobby, it was $12, 40% off, but the item number for this is RSC1706, and I'm unsure if they sell this in store, online, but they do sell it in store, and I again saw it again this year in 2 different Hobby Lobbies that I went to. So here we have the wreath. We're not going to add any additional greenery at this point. We can pepper in some picks and decorations later on, but my main focus at this point is to add our bow. So we're going to be doing this bow in separate pieces. We're going to start off with the chicken wire, and the reason I'm doing it in separate stages is simply because the wire is quite thick, and it's not very easy to work that into the bow, so we're going to simulate that by adding it step by step. So for starters, we're going to take our chicken wire, and we're going to place it, leaving a slight overhang down below. And we're going to place this directly in the middle of the wreath. Just like that. And then we can flip our wreath over and attach it on top. So we're not doing the traditional style wreath that we typically do. We're doing something a little bit different today, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this technique. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it again towards the top, or you can just simply gather it together. And I am kind of creating a loop like that, or a little bump, to add some dimension. And then we'll secure it up top using the twist ties that come on top of the wreath. So now we have an elevated surface using our chicken wire. I wouldn't go any more than about 3.5 to 4 inches. That's the max I would go, or else your wreath would look incredibly bulky. But our next step is just to simply cut it off up top. And we're going to cut it off about 6 to 7 inches above the bow. And I'm using wire cutters for this, and I highly encourage you to do so as well. Your scissors will be incredibly dull if you cut this using your scissors, so make sure you're using wire cutters. And then our next step is to add a little bit more of this. So I do understand it might be a little bit difficult to see the flocked chicken wire against our flocked wreath, but all I've done so far is I've placed one piece directly in the middle of the wreath, and I do find it important to be perfect in the middle for today's design versus the other designs where we kind of off-center everything. So I've placed one right in the middle, kind of made it a little taller than the wreath, and added about a 6 to 8 inch piece on either side. Our next step is to swoop it down. So our main bow is going to be right in this middle portion. So now what we'll do is we'll just cinch it together in one end, open up the twist that we just placed this in, leave a little bit of an overhang just in case the twist is not as tight as we think it is. So by having it a little bit extra, we can kind of bend that up, and if this is faulty, we kind of have a little bit more reassurance there. And now what I'll do is I'll simply cascade that to the side of our wreath. And then again, we're going to take the twist ties and just pinch it together. This is the same height as the one in the middle. I do find that important to keep it the same height. And now we'll cut a little bit of an overhang, again about 6 to 8 inches. And when I cut, I always just cut right in between the chicken wire. This chicken wire is not farm grade. This is definitely a little bit thinner than your traditional chicken wire, so it's not quite so pokey. But if it is pokey, you could always just cut that little bit off and adjust as needed. So we placed one on the right-hand side, and now we're going to do the same exact thing on the opposing side. And I am using the same twist. So this is going to be the most difficult part to see, but I'm just placing one piece in the middle, one on either side, and trying to make it as even as I possibly can. So again, I'm opening up the same twist, placing our third bit with a little bit of excess hanging off of it, closing it, and now bringing it out. Just like that. And now we can cut off the excess like we just did. Again, about 6 to 8 inches. And now we've added our chicken wire. So we still have a little bit left in case we decide we want to add it. We can add that in later. We only have about a foot left. But if we need a little bit more tails up top, kind of shooting away from the wreath, we still have a little bit left to place. But now let's get in our second ribbon, which is that beautiful ribbon that came from Trendy Tree. Now it's time to create our secondary bow that's going to lie on top of our chicken wire. And we're going to create the loops approximately 5 inches to 6 inches. It depends on how large you want your bow. Of course, our bow in this particular design is going to be our focal point, and we're going to adorn the rest of the wreath with accent pieces. So this is going to be our main focus for our design today. So I do encourage you to add lots of loops. You do want to make sure it's nice and full. And I'm going to drop my ribbon to the floor. I find it easier to work with it when it's on the ground. And then I'm going to pinch in the middle. I do have an in-depth tutorial teaching you how to make a bow. This is the same exact bow as all of the other bows we create, a very simple traditional bow. But just as a quick overview, we're pinching in the middle, we're twisting the ribbon completely around so that the pretty side is facing down and the ugly side is on top. And what happens when you do it that way is the pretty side is revealed once more when you gather the loops again together. So this ribbon's quite thick, which is awesome to work with in a bow. And that's exactly what we want. We want the ribbon to be nice and thick and hold its shape. So we have 4 large loops on either side, and now we'll come back in with a few more loops. And the few more I'm making are just slightly smaller. That way it doesn't protrude too far from the wreath. So we'll place a couple more smaller loops towards the middle. And now we can cut it off. So I've added 4 large loops on either side, and then 3 more loops on either side that are slightly smaller, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches smaller. And that'll help keep a smaller bow in the middle, but large and showy around the edges. So you'll notice that I'm just adding a pipe cleaner now, making sure all of my loops are contained, and making sure that it's extremely tight and secure. So I've wrapped this several times. And we still have a couple yards left over that we'll add for tails. I'm going to hold off on adding those quite yet. We can add them individually afterwards. So let's get to securing this bow to our wreath. So now we can begin attaching our bow to the wreath, and I'm going to place it a little bit higher than where all of the chicken wire was attached. So here we have a little cluster where the chicken wire is attached. It's already bulky and elevated, so I'm going to come back right behind it and secure it to the metal frame behind it. Make sure you're securing it directly to the metal frame and not just either the chicken wire or the greenery. You want it to have some support in the back, some rigid support, and the chicken wire nor the greenery will keep it up in place long enough. So now that we have our bow attached, we can begin fluffing it. Keep in mind we're going to have to fluff it over and over again, especially since this bow is going to be our focal point. But as you can tell, bow making is extremely easy. I think the biggest tip for all of you is practice. For those of you that do have difficulty with bow making, my biggest tip and bit of advice is just to practice with ribbon. If you don't want to use expensive ribbon, you could always just use inexpensive ribbon. There really is no difference. I'd recommend starting with the premium quality ribbon. It's a little bit more easier to work with. And you don't have to actually cut it. You can just practice with it and keep making bows and bows and bows until you get the hang of it. And then once you get the hang of it, it'll all make sense, and everything from there on out will just be easy when it comes to bow making. So now that we have our bow attached and fluffed, what we can do is begin attaching some artificial tails. So we're going to want to place these in the same exact location as the other tails using the chicken wire. We could place them behind. I recommend placing them on top. I think that'll give us the best effect. So I'm just going to open up the twist where the chicken wire was. Now we're dealing with smaller ribbon, so it's not really going to make it any more bulky. And I'm just going to place it in there. And twist it until it gets to where the chicken wire is. And notice that I have it pressed against the chicken wire. And then we'll just secure it in the same locations as the chicken wire was secured. So now we'll cut that little excess off. We're going to cut it the same length as the chicken wire. You can cut it a little bit longer if you want. Not really going to make a huge difference. Now we'll come back in to the opposing side. And especially if you're just starting out, sometimes it's easier to do things in sections and in pieces. And also when I'm placing these, I am leaving about 1 inch of an overhang in case the twist tie becomes loose. It just gives us a little bit more leverage. Come back towards the chicken wire, secure it in the same location. And we can always adjust everything afterwards. Cut an overhang. And then our last piece of ribbon. And we still have about a yard or two left. So we were able to make a huge bow and have a little excess pieces left that we can use in another project. So now our last bit of ribbon is going to go exactly where the middle piece is. And we can fluff and adjust everything afterwards. And then we'll just cut the excess off, and we have our bow constructed with the chicken wire. So our next step is to add either some greenery or some decorative picks. So we've added our bow, we've added our chicken wire. Our next step is to add something to go around the edge to soften it. So I have these picks that we used years ago. These are just leftover bits and pieces. I don't have the SKU number for this. These came from Jacobson Floral. But a good substitute are these flocked picks that are 60 cents each right now at Hobby Lobby. And for reference, the item number is 5347216. And I have ones that are very similar on the front, and then they're just black on the back. So we're going to be adding these in the same direction as the greenery, which is clockwise in this case. And all I'm doing is I'm hot gluing the ends, and I'm placing them at random around the perimeter. So these will add a softer touch, making the wreath look a little less clumpy. When dealing with the flocked material, what I've found over the years is that it seems to look a lot more heavy than an evergreen wreath. And in my opinion, when you add flocked material, it should be subtle, it should be soft, and it shouldn't be so bulky. So just by peppering in some of these, we're going to get the desired effect that we're going for. And again, I'm placing them in the same direction that the greenery is already going. And the wonderful thing about dealing with flocked wreaths is it doesn't take as much as it would if you were doing an evergreen wreath. Of course, if we were doing an evergreen wreath, we would want to almost completely cover it with higher quality greenery. In this case, it's not going to make a difference by having excessive amounts of greenery, because in the end, it's all going to just look flocked anyway. So I'm working some around the perimeter, and as we always do, we're going to tie some smaller pieces in towards the middle. And I'm spacing these every 4 or 5 inches at minimum. The only thing with these, since we're adding them to kind of create a more whimsical touch, is you don't necessarily want to space them out too far, or else when you go to display your wreath or take pictures or sell it, it is going to look staggered and clumpy. So just keep that in mind as you're adding this. Now we can come back in and place a few pieces towards the central portion of the wreath, and that'll kind of bring in this texture throughout the design. I'm going to place one more around the perimeter right here so it doesn't look so clumpy and staggered. And then we'll just place the remaining 2 pieces towards the bow, just like that. Didn't use a whole bunch of it, but as you can see, it softened the edge of our wreath. Like I said, if you don't have this greenery or this flocked pick, you could always just substitute with this and you would get the same exact effect. Just make sure that when you add these, I wouldn't actually cut them because we do want to have them being revealed so much. So if you did cut them individually, you would kind of lose them within the flocking. So I would just keep them in their entirety and probably pick up about 12 or so, since they are only 60 cents each. So $6 worth of this to add around the perimeter to not only enlarge the wreath, but also make it a little less bulky. So as a designer, you constantly change your mind, and I thought the filler branches around would be enough, but I do want to add a little bit more substance. So let's do a quick overview of what this wreath is going to look like in the end. The majority of all of our things we're going to be adding are going to be up towards the bow, cascading down. We do have a beautiful flocked wreath that I truly don't want to cover too much of. I really like the look of flocked wreaths, and we are going to just enhance that with additional flocked picks right now. So the pick I have chosen are these picks that came from Hobby Lobby. They come with 3 of these stems right here, and they were 99 cents each, plus an additional 40% off. And the item number for these is 5347216. I gave you those in the earlier clip, but now it's time to add a few of those. So you don't have to actually add any of these ones that we've added before. I just had them on hand, and now that we have them on the wreath, we can just enhance it a little bit more by using some of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in between each of those, and I'm going to place those a little bit closer towards the wreath than the other ones. Just like that. So what this will do is create a layered-like effect by having some picks closer towards the wreath and some shooting away a little bit further. Some of these branches will be sticking out even further than the ones we're adding now, and that's perfectly fine. That'll just add a natural feel to our wreath. So again, just coming back in between the ones we've added so far and placing some of those. And you guys will see me use these types of picks in all sorts of designs. These are one of my favorite picks that Hobby Lobby carries. They're an incredible value, and they do a great job of coverage. So I use them quite frequently. They're one of my favorites. I'm using a generous amount of hot glue. These typically stay in place because they're extremely lightweight, but we want to ensure that, so I am adding a little extra hot glue with these. So now I've placed it all the way around the left-hand side, and as you can see, it just bulked it up a little bit more so than the right-hand side. So now we're going to do the same exact process on the right-hand side. Pull back the chicken wire from the top and place a piece in between there. So I recommend picking up about 10 of these. If you want to use more, you can. If you want to use less, you certainly can do that as well. But for 60 cents each, you truly can't go wrong. And even if you pick up too many of these, we definitely will be using these again in a future project. And the nice thing about using these is that you can use these in all sorts of designs, whether they're whimsical or like this, which is a little bit more natural. They have no glitter on them. Essentially, it's just a snow-covered flocked pick. So we're going to need one more piece down below. And we'll just place this one right here. So now if we stand back, you can definitely see this significantly enlarged our design. Right now where the wreath is, it's approximately 30 to 32 inches wide, which is just incredible by adding about $6 worth of picks all the way around. And you can also see that there's a lot of room in between all of the picks. It's light and airy, and that's the exact style that we're going for here. So again, I recommend picking up at least 10. If you pick up 15, awesome, and if we don't use them all in this project, you can use them in the future projects we're going to be designing for Christmas, because we do have a lot in store for Christmas. But like I said, the majority of our design is going to be placed up here. We may pepper in some ornaments and picks down below, but nothing like we traditionally do. We're going to keep it nice and flocked, as that is the feel of our wreath. But I really think these added a nice touch and bulked it up a little bit more around the edges while still maintaining that airy and light feeling. So now we're going to be adding some of these frosted berries, and if you do decide to replicate this design, I recommend only using products that are either flocked or frosted, if the camera will focus, right there. So as you can see, these are covered in little bits of snow. So the reason I recommend that and strictly these types of products is because we want this wreath to look as though it's been placed outside and succumb to a light frost. We don't want it to look as though we have some metallic ornaments that are ultra shiny. We want everything to look as though it's been on this wreath for a while and it got a light frost on it. So these are $6 each. They were $9.99 each, 40% off, and the item number is 518-2340. And I've broken down one spray. Since there's only about 4 or 5 stems on each spray, I believe we may need 1 or 2 more additional sprays. And what I'm going to start off doing is placing some of them swooping downhill. And these also have a nice foliage as well. So I'm hot gluing these in place using my glue skillet. And we can bend them to shape afterwards, but we do want the glue to dry before we manipulate them too much. So I've placed 3 on one side, and we still have 1 stem left, I believe. Oh, we have 2 stems left. So in total, this spray has 5 stems. we place one a little bit higher. And now let's add our final stem from this one spray. And like I said before, we are going to have things end up shooting straight forward. We're kind of going for a 3D-like wreath. This is a little bit different than our normal designs because we are going kind of out of our element by making it a little bit more whimsical than my typical style. But we've added one spray of this so far. Let's break down a second spray and we can begin adding it to this wreath. I've broken down a second spray and we're going to do the same exact thing that we did on the left-hand side, now on the right-hand side. Just replicate it the exact same way by having them swoop down. It's okay if you pull back your bow a little bit. We are going to have to adjust that over and over again. That's just the nature of working with bows into your designs. And no matter how much we fluff it, towards the end, once we go to take our pictures, we're going to have to adjust it once more. So I've placed a few more pieces up top. We are going to have other elements coming up top as well. That'll kind of space everything out accordingly so it doesn't look like just a clump of berries. We're going to use some twigs in the next clip. But we've added some of them. We still have one piece left. So for the piece that we have left, what we're going to do is just break it in half. So I'm just going to come back with this and break the pick in half so that we have two smaller pieces that we can tuck in. Hot glue the ends, and what we're going to do with these is we're actually going to tie them into the bow. So we are dealing with a perfect bow, and we do have a lot of loops, but we don't really want to have it looking like it's sticking out of nowhere. So I'm just going to take two pieces like that, place one here like we just did, and then come right on the opposing side and place another piece. This will help break up the bow a little bit, but we still want a showy bow, so don't cover it too much with additional greenery and berries and picks and all of that, because we don't want to disturb it too much, but we want to make sure that it looks incorporated into the design. So now we're going to go ahead and add some twigs. So here's the twigs I have chosen. They are also covered in that frosted flocking material. If the camera will focus, there we go. Right there. So these were $7.99, and as you can see, you do get a lot of them. They were 40% off, and the item number is 5080197 from Hobby Lobby. So we're going to start off with some of them doing the same exact motion that we did with the berries. And this will just add a little bit of realness to it because we do have some twigs in it, so it's going to make it look a little bit more realistic. And also soften the whole display of berries. We don't want just berries to be shooting out the top. We want to have some more other natural, realistic branches in it. So like I said, my main focus at this point is making sure that the glue is going to dry, and then we can manipulate them afterwards, because the nice thing about dealing with these berries is that they're also wired, and they can be moved and manipulated very easily. So this one I just twisted. You can move them whichever way you want, and there is quite a thick, rigid wire inside of them. Now we'll just come back in underneath the bow and place one of these inside. And if we need to trim them later on, we certainly can do so as well. So I've placed about 3 or 4 pieces on the right hand side. Now let's do the same thing on the left hand. Now it's time to do the same thing that we just did to the right hand side to the left with the twigs. And like I said before, we're not going to worry too much about placement at this point because we can adjust these. These are wired stems. And I often get asked a lot if we can use real twig branches in our wreaths like this, and you certainly can. I would just be a little weary because once stems dry, they are a lot more brittle, and if you do ship your wreaths, the twigs more than likely won't stay in place and they'll break. But you certainly can use them if you're selling locally and advertise that it's a natural wreath with natural products and stuff like that. But I wouldn't really ship twigs like this if they were real. They just wouldn't hold up. Okay, so now I want to place one going uphill. So what I've done is I've just cut a stick into a smaller piece, and we'll just have that shooting up. So we still maintain that rounded effect, so it's not flat on the top. I never encourage you to design a wreath where it's flat on top. You'll never see me do that. So you always want to place a few things shooting up. If we decide to break into a third berry spray, we could of course place a couple slightly off center, but going uphill as well. So now we've added some of the fake twigs on the left-hand side, as well as the right. And now we have a couple additional pieces that, if we want to balance things off, we certainly can. I'm going to take one more of the twigs in its entirety and place it underneath like we did towards the right-hand side. And I think that's good for now for the twigs. So let's get to adding another element to this design. Before we proceed any further, like I said earlier in the video, we're not going to be adding much down below. So we do want to add a little bit more of those flocked picks for 60 cents that we added around. I've broken down 3 of them, so $1.80 worth of these picks, and that should do it for coverage towards this area. So whenever I add elements in, I like to tie them through the inside out or outside in. I like them to be universal throughout the design. So what I've done is I've taken those sprays and I've cut one piece off of each. So each piece we ended up with 2 separate pieces. So in total we have 6. And I also have 3 individual pieces with just one spray since we cut it off here. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin placing a few of these towards the inside of our design. And these are wired as well, so we can manipulate them a little bit later on, kind of forcing them in the direction we want. We'll place one lower down, right there. We'll take another piece that has 2. And we'll place it there. And we still have 3 individual pieces that we can pepper in. So I'll just place one there. And notice that these are still going in the same direction as the greenery. You can't really notice on a flocked wreath as well as you could on an evergreen form. But I do find it important to have everything going in the same direction. We'll place one there, and then our final one we'll place a little bit higher. Right there. So now we filled in the middle portion a little bit more, tying in the white from the outside towards the interior. And now what we can do is begin finishing our wreath with a few more elements. Now we're going to add 2 pieces that are 20 inches in length on either side of the wreath, and this will finish off our wreath with a little bit more ribbon and give us the effect that we're trying to go for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back my bow, and it is kind of messing up our bow, but that's fine because we are going to fluff it before we take pictures again. I'm going to find a twist that I can wrap the ribbon around and make sure it's secure. Gonna wrap it around the twist, open up our bow a little bit, and then take this ribbon, pull it behind the wreath, go down about halfway, about 10 inches down, and twist it using the twist ties on the wreath. So this will just add a little bit more ribbon into our design without overdoing it, and kind of go with the same curvature of our design. So we can fluff these and adjust them as needed. and kind of curl them up. But let's focus on getting the other one in place. So let's move our camera a little bit towards the right, adjust our easel so you guys can get a better visual, and then attach our final piece. So again, lift the bow, find a twist behind the bow, twist it secure, go down about halfway, twist 2 branches together, and we have a little bit more ribbon on the side. You can't see it all that much head on, you just see kind of the curve of the ribbon, which is all that's needed in this case. Since we have 3 pieces in the middle, we did want to bring it out a little bit to kind of go with the round feel of our wreath. And now what we can do is just run our fingers through the ribbon until we get it to our liking. And as always, if we want to curl it up at the end, we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and fluff our bow real quick, adjust it a little bit more, and then show you guys how the wreath has turned out.